everyone, to another episode of the Radiant Others Klezmer podcast. As always, my name is Dan Blacksburg, and I'm a trombonist playing klezmer, experimental music, composing, teaching, what have you, and recording this podcast directly from my basement in West Philadelphia. Here at Radiant Others, we give you informal and in-depth conversations between myself and another person or people from our glorious worldwide scene of Yiddish music, language, culture, and any other avenue or tributary or stream that our work takes us towards. The reason I make this podcast is because I want to share with you the inspiring kinds of conversations, which for me were always the late night back room, mostly sharing of war stories on the gig or on the job, or just how somebody found a certain piece of information that just really changed their lives musically or scholarly speaking. These are the kinds of conversations that always drove me further, to go deeper into my exploration of Yiddish music, Yiddish culture, even just klezmer trombone or recordings of klezmer music. This is the kind of stuff that got me going, and so I hope it gets you all fired up to do your own work and really become a part of this worldwide community, or to go after whatever kind of music or culture you're exploring in your own life with the same level of intensity and joy. Today's episode features a musician who has done this in a deep and personal way for her whole career, and that's violinist, composer, and bandleader Alicia Svigals. Alicia's music, both on her own albums and as a founding member of the Klezmatics, is a really big part of the sound of Yiddish music that first sparked my ear and dragged me wholeheartedly into this music. And it's such a pleasure to talk to her, to get into the details of her new record called Fiedel of Fire, which is a whole set of rocking traditional and traditional style klezmer tunes ready for you to dance to, out now on the Borscht Beat label. And we talk about how this record fits into her whole career, her whole development as an artist. We get into some of the early years of her own playing and also of the klezmer revival, where she was, like I said, kind of on the cutting edge of all this stuff. She shares a whole bunch of exactly the kind of stories that made me go, wow. They made me go wow back then, just like that I was talking about, and they still make me go wow, honestly. And you'll hear all about that in our conversation. She also shared some thoughts just about being an artist that were things that I kind of really needed to hear right now at this point in my life. So I hope all of this stuff hits you with as much excitement and joy and fun and thoughtfulness as it does to me. As always, I'm here to ask for your support. This podcast is a big labor of love for me and my producer, Bela Unger. I don't get to pay them the amount that I'd love to. I don't get to make enough podcasts episodes as much as I'd want to. All of that. We'd love to do more. And we are so grateful for everybody who has supported us all the different ways over the years that I've been making it, and over the year and plus that Bale has been my partner in this. And we could use even more support from you. So one way to do that is to contact us directly and just ask us how you can support. And another way to do it is to sign up on Patreon. That's patreon.com/radiantothers. And as always, there'll be a link to that, and there'll be a link to all the music that you hear in this episode. And I think that's all I've got. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Alicia Svigals. We're back with another episode of Radiant Others, and it is my pleasure and honor to have violinist, bandleader, composer Alicia Svigals with me today.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, I was just remembering some wild parts of my early career life in which Alicia was really central, you know, some of the first wedding gigs I ever played and all these other things. And it's wild, you know, you've been doing this for a minute, and then turns out you you know everybody for a really long time.
Yeah, we go way back.
I know, but it's really great to be able to sit down and talk. But way back, we're talking about right now because you have a brand new klezmer fiddle record out that we really need to tell everybody out so that they can all buy it in whatever format they choose to buy it and at least listen to it and stream it 1,000 times so you can make a buck, literally. But
Yeah, right.
Tell us about your new record and tell us, like, why now? You know, you mentioned that it's a sort of follow-up to your fiddle record, which was just a little while ago. But yeah, tell us about this new record that you got.
Well, this record had a long, long gestation, a whole generation, actually. It's kind of like a cicada. So I made Fiedel, which was my first solo outing, and it came out in 1997. It was the first all klezmer fiddle album, which was all about the violin, and it featured a kind of old world style and instrumentation. There were a lot of string band tracks on it, and it launched a bit of a klezmer fiddle revival. And then after that, I just didn't get around to it again. I know that's no excuse, but I was very busy. And I'm also kind of a perfectionist. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make a follow-up to this, but I want to be better by the time I do that. So I practiced and I woodshed and I took lessons. And, finally 30 years later, it was like, okay, it's kind of now or never. I'm 61.
Yeah, it's only like 25 years later, 26 or so. You did it. You got it in time.
That's right. I got in, before the cicadas did. So
that's right.
Since it's a follow-up, I called it Fiedel a Fire. And it's different from Fiedel because whereas that one was sort of old worldy and stringy, and was a departure from what one was mostly hearing in the klezmer revival then, which was like the big banging, sound of the klezmer conservatory band, the Klezmatics, which I was in at the time, which was more of a rocked out sound. The klezmer revival at that point was, as was to be expected probably, an extension of the American klezmer sound that had gone dormant in the 60s and 70s, but was what one heard at parties, weddings, and such in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. So clarinets, trumpets, trombones, the beloved trombone, which is the favorite instrument of all klezmer enthusiasts. And so Fiedel was looking to an earlier model of klezmer playing, the iconic image of the fiddle, which we knew from Chagall's paintings and Shalom Aleichem stories, and then Fiddler on the Roof. It was an idea and a visual image, but it wasn't so much in people's ears anymore. So I tried to kind of excavate, recreate, and sort of half invent that sound too. So then fast forward to now, with Fiedel a Fire, I decided to do something that also foregrounded the violin, but this time to do it in that big band setting with a lot of that American repertoire, Dave Tarras, Max Epstein kind of stuff. And I think the klezmer fiddle revival in general has continued in the direction of, sometimes people have called it an early music approach. And a lot of klezmer fiddlers have carefully studied and gone back to the actual fiddle recordings. I've always loved the clarinetists and their sound. And I like the idea of, apparently Naftali Brandwein modeled his playing on klezmer fiddling. So it felt justified, to then turn around and model my playing on Naftali Brandwein and also on Dave Tarras. So that stuff is very clarinetistic. It's hard, it's technically difficult, but I've kind of figured out a way to do it on the fiddle. So it, if you close your eyes, sometimes you can't tell it's not a clarinet, but it is also, I throw my own fiddly sounds into it too. So that's what Fiddle of Fire is. It's got originals. It's got these mid-century tracks, mid-century style tracks, and it's got one song. And I did a lot of other stuff. Actually, I didn't record a lot. I'm not prolific. I'm very particular and I slow and so I did a couple of other albums. I did one with Uli Geisendorfer, who is a terrific, wonderful jazz pianist. It was an album of all Barakovsky material. We could talk about that more if you want. That we did with his kind of expanded harmonic vocabulary. But Fiedel of Fire is the first real trad album I've made since Fiedel.
And it's really great. I can't tell you how many times I've sent tracks from Fiedel to people being like, oh, you want to know what to do here? Just start here, and it is fun. It is cool that you've made this, trad album, but with this sort of like more rockin' big bandy American sound that, like, let's be honest, a lot of the cats who played that stuff, if they came over from Europe, they probably went and left their fiddles in their closet and picked up a tenor saxophone or a clarinet or a trumpet. Like, literally, that's what happened for a lot of them. And
right.
so to figure out how to like put the fiddle into that sound is cool. And it is definitely something that I associate with you as a klezmer violinist. And like, listen, I totally get it. I've been in so many jam sessions where the violinists are like in a room playing their tunes in E major and A major, and they're having a really good time. Maybe there's a cymbal player.
Yep.
And then one tenor saxophone comes in and starts playing in B flat. And then eventually more horns show up, and then all the string players pack up their instruments and leave.
Yep.
I mean, I've seen it a lot. So like I totally understand why you would want to go to that old style, that old fiddle style, and be like, hey, let's have fun in a space where it's like safe to, and we can hear each other.
Yes.
Like I totally get it. I totally get it. But it's funny you said that about Brandwein, because for me as a trombone player trying to figure out how to play klezmer melodies and being like, how am I supposed to do this? Like the fiddle style, especially the older fiddlers, because they weren't playing so many flashy things, was something I could start with because I could kind of be like, it's very slidey, something I could kind of sink my teeth into as a trombone player.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, well, this is an entry point to that, like that Leon Schwartz stuff or some of the older things. And it reminds me of this idea of how we develop our sounds and how you actually said this really well. We're both excavating something from the past and sort of bringing it into the present, but we're also inventing it. It's like we're not even reinventing it. We're actually inventing it because you have maybe 10, 20 minutes of sound that you can base an entire style off of, If you're talking about like the old recordings or something like that, you don't have like a million hours.
Interesting.
And you certainly don't have people that you can go and say, how do you do this? How do you do this? I mean, were you able to hang out with some of the old cats?
I was, because I'm that old, So, as one of the songs says on the album. So I spent some time with Leon Schwartz. And actually, I had an uncle, a great uncle, who was the teenage trumpeter in Naftali Brandwein's band. Wow. And I kind of missed the chance to get his books because I was young, but I have some klezmer yichus that way. And
that's great.
I got to hang out with and play with Sid Beckerman and the Epsteins. This was all a Klez Camp, the original Klez Camp in the Catskills. But I also, when I was a teenager, I first heard Andy Statman at the beginning of the revival. So I was also like a second wave revivalist. And it's true, I never thought of it that way, that there's only so many minutes of actual recordings in addition to whatever exposure we had to, living purveyors of the tradition. But even if there were hours of recordings, I would say that musicians are, they're creators, creative people, and it's always invented. The people that we were emulating invented what they were doing too. I'm sure they did not sound like their teachers or the generation before them. If we only had that time machine, we would hear how the sound evolved over the decades and centuries. Good musicians, interesting musicians, are always taking whatever and putting their own personal stamp on it, because otherwise it would be boring, right? If everybody sounded the same.
Oh, absolutely. And like that gets to a topic that I really wanted to ask you about, which is your violin sound, which is something that is a really important part of my like klezmer world in my ear, like the timbre of your playing. And, a lot of that's because Klezmatics was my entryway and hearing you in that band. But then even still, it's like no one sounds like Alicia Svigals, and you have a specific sound within klezmer that I think synthesizes, like you said, and creates from a lot of different places, which, some of it I'm sure has to do with your cosmopolitan upbringing in New York. But I was, reading about you growing up being in the worker circle, being in bluegrass scenes and all the classical folk scenes. And, I was just thinking about, like, in terms of you developing your sound, what would be your story like up until the point when you started doing it really consciously, and then from then, what were some of the like both like really intentional ways that you chose to play the violin and ways that kind of, things that came in from outside, whether it was klezmer like from Andy or from Leon or something else from a different genre that like hit you and you said, well, I have to do that now. Because I can, that's how I think about myself. It's like there's definitely like what I thought I was doing and then what ended up happening. And some of that was under my control. And some of it was like an external wavelength came and hit me and knocked me off course. But I'm like, well, thank God, because that's really where I should have been going all along,
Yeah,
So like,
sure.
From so did you start on a classical path, or like where did it start, and then where did it start becoming your own choices?
Well, just as a violinist, I started out being trained classically. I started when I was 5, and a year of Suzuki, and then I took violin lessons. But when I was 16, I started getting into different kinds of traditional music, Irish music, and old-timey fiddle. I never really got, deeply into any of them. I loved them and I was trying, but I didn't quite know how to learn something like that yet. And then when I was in college, I dropped out for a year and a half and went hitchhiking around Europe playing on the streets. And there were traditional music revivals bubbling up in 1983 all over Europe. And the term world music hadn't been invented yet, but cassettes had been invented and they were being passed around. And so some of this music was becoming accessible that way. And I played with Berber musicians in Paris and traditional Catalan music players in Ibiza. I just kept hitchhiking and meeting people. And I was a teenager. And it was very exciting. And the way I met these musicians was playing on the streets. And actually, I had been playing on the streets since I was 16 in New York to earn money to go to music camp. It was chamber music camp, which I did. I made enough money to go to music camp. And then I was earning money for my college tuition. And I was one of the first people to do it. So I had kind of a windfall. Like it was 1982 and I was making $150 an hour playing on the subway.
What?
I know, it was crazy.
That's stunning.
But I didn't appreciate the value of money enough, so I would play like for an hour and a half and then call it a day. I was like, all right, that's enough.
I mean, in a way, though.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to play 8 hours in the subway? So when I'm playing on the streets, I would meet musicians and I was invited to join a charanga band and I had a great time. So when I graduated college, I didn't have like a job plan because I was like, I don't know, I can make $100 an hour, $150 an hour playing in the subway. I think I'm just going to keep doing that. And that's what I did. I came back to New York. I had musical adventures and eventually, I mean, it didn't even, not even eventually, like, a few months in, I got a job playing in a Greek nightclub in Astoria, which is the Greek neighborhood in New York. At that time, it was very happening. Eventually, there was a big repatriation of, the Greek immigrants from that neighborhood. A lot of people went back to Greece when the economy improved there. But when I was there was a huge Greek community with a really fabulous musical scene, like multiple clubs where people would play traditional music, Greek popular music, and people would come with, 4 generations of their family, the children and the grandparents, and dance till 3 in the morning. And so I became very enamored of Greek fiddle style and quite obsessed with it. And I spent a long time trying to figure out how they were making the sounds they were making, and in particular, getting the timbre that they got. And at the same time, I answered an ad in the Village Voice, which was where people looking for band members would place ads, public notice music. And somebody placed an ad looking to form a klezmer band. That person didn't continue after a couple of months, but the band became the Klezmatics. I answered the ad. And so I was also trying to figure out how to make those sounds. And somehow those things, like, they were happening at the same time, and they ended up melding in my brain. So I kind of added this Greek fiddle timbre that you mentioned. That's kind of what it is. It's actually Turkish. It's like an Ottoman fiddle thing, because it's also in Turkish music, Greek music. I added it kind of, like you said, unconsciously, which is where the best kind of creation comes from, for me anyway, when things just pop into my head instead of trying to like force something to happen. It just happens, probably like unconscious processing. So it popped into my klezmer fiddle playing, but like for a reason, because I felt like there was so much potential expressiveness, and klezmer is emotional music, and I'm kind of an emotional person, and like I needed to express like high emotion, and this was another parameter, that I can make that happen with. I could heighten the emotion of a note or a phrase with a timbre change. And I don't know that that's the kind of meaning of it in the culture that I took it from, but it's that's what it means in my idiolect, my private language.
That's right. But it's also, there's so many connections between Greek music and klezmer music.
Yeah.
And then if you're sort of transposing a new sound into a traditional function of a Jewish music, like that is the creativity, right? Like that's synthesis right there. It's really cool. And one thing that I just want to add to it is that what's cool to me is that Greek Ottoman timbre really seems to lend itself well to being amplified, almost like a rock and roll instrument.
Right.
I think because it's so overtone rich.
Yeah.
It's almost like a little bit like acoustic distortion.
Totally.
And so one of the other things that I always associate with you is that you sound great amplified. Like you're, and also you take great rock and roll solos. Because I can say that from all the wedding gigs we've played together. I'm always like, every time it's Alicia's turn to take a solo on the popular music set, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna enjoy this. I always do.
Thank you.
I always do.
Well, that was the other thing I didn't mention, that I was trained classically, and I love classical music, but as a teenager I was a total like metalhead, but not not in the 80s sense. Like what's called classic rock now in its time was called heavy metal, but it is no longer. So like Led Zeppelin was considered heavy metal. Now Led Zeppelin's considered classic rock.
Yeah.
So I don't mean metalhead in the, Metallica sense. I'm just a little older than that. So, but I was totally a metalhead. I wore that blue blue eye makeup up to my eyebrows. And, I dressed like a 1976 rock fan. And I bought all the rock magazines, Cream, Circus, Hit Parade, and I spent my time cutting out all the tiny pictures of my heroes, Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, the Stones, and then pasting them on my walls of my suburban bedroom, which like gave my parents a headache because every inch of the walls and the ceiling were covered with these tiny cutouts. And and I knew every note of every album, and I was just, that was the sound in my ears, was like Jimmy Page's guitar and Jimi Hendrix and, all the rock gods. And so when the Klezmatics started doing this sort of rocked out thing in 1988, after we had gone to a World Music Festival, when World Music was new, as a marketing name.
Yes,
right?
It's wild to me, but yes, absolutely.
Right. Everything seems like it's been happening forever, but most things haven't. So the producer was like,
right.
There are a lot of bands that take traditional music, but they, diffuse them with contemporary sounds. Would you be interested in trying that? And that's how that happened in 1988 at this festival in Berlin. So to me, it was like, yeah, I've always wanted to play power chords.
Right. And what's more power chordy than second fiddle anyway,
Exactly. And especially if you do play on an amplified violin with a pickup and you press a little too hard, then, you're all set.
I know. I was just hanging out with some violins yesterday, and there were a couple people who were more experienced with, both amplified playing and also extended technique playing. And then there was someone who really wanted to learn, and they were like, "Yo, yeah, you just like bow pressure." And they're like, "Wait, you could do more than one kind of bow pressure?" It's one of those kind of things. If you're coming, and it's like, yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I added, I kept going, yeah, you really should check out Hungarian fiddle playing because you'll find some variations in sound you might never have heard before.
Oh, yeah, totally. The Tanzhaus stuff.
Yeah.
I did get to play finally with an incarnation of Led Zeppelin with Plant and Page in their 1990s reunion tour, and John Bonham's son on the drums. And
wow.
That was amazing.
I'm sure. That must have been such a thrill. And also, but it's so funny. I always tell people well, it's like you said klezmer is emotional music, which is totally true. And it kind of I'm into heavy music, but it can be heavy in lots of different ways, It's so funny how what you're saying to me makes me think that, your whole work is just such a natural extension of all the things that you are as a musical person, right? And yet there's all these decisions about, playing this kind of music, that kind of music. You've been a successful band leader, but you're not you're an artist. You're not a play whatever you put in front of me freelancer. Although, I'm sure you've done that many, many, many times.
I'll take any gig. Just putting that out there. I'll do it.
Yeah, it's important. Listen, it's actually really important for our younger listeners. And by younger, I mean anybody under anything, or even just any listener. It's like, if you think we're cool musicians, that doesn't mean that we don't need gigs. Because we actually need gigs. Speaking of Andy Statman, I was talking to him. I had the opportunity. It was an honor to play with him for the first real time, in an intimate setting. Pete Reshevsky at Pete's little Harlem Shul gig that he's been doing. And Andy's like, yeah, I really wish I was playing more. I was like, I think people don't realize that we actually we really like playing music. That's the bottom line. We really love playing music, and we'd like to do it as often as possible. And B, almost none of us are busy enough that you can't at least ask.
Musicians need gigs.
We need gigs, It's so wild. It's like you commit to a specific path or a specific set of paths, say playing klezmer music, and things go up and down and twists and turns, and you kind of never know. And I was, thinking about that Berlin. Was that the same festival that you ended up being offered the recording thing and recorded?
Our first album, yeah, Heimatklänge, yeah.
Yeah. Just like I mean, I've heard the story a couple times, and it sounds so fast. And I was just thinking about like one of the questions I had was like, what was it like to be growing as an individual artist at the same time that like these kind of global trends, or like klezmer was sort of taking its place on a world stage for the first time. I mean, I'm sure in a way you couldn't see, you were just doing what you could do at the time you were doing it. But from like even a perspective of mine, I'm like, when I entered this music 2 years ago or so, it was like fully formed in a certain way. And now it's fully formed in a completely different way.
Mm.
But then it was, I think, at least from my perspective, did it feel like fully formed and you were just kind of doing what you could do? Or was it like, was there a different kind of sense of possibility? Because from my perspective, it's like, wow, it was really like coalescing. Something like a bunch of different kind of things were coalescing, like we just said, really quickly sometimes.
Yeah, they were coalescing for me and for us in real time. I mean, when I started, it was sort of a wacky, very marginal thing to do that nobody, like most Jews, had never heard of. And, certainly my parents did not understand it as like a career thing. I didn't either. It was just, I was young and I was just doing what I loved musically. And I was resigned since childhood to the fact that I liked weird things that other people didn't like as much. And it was always going to be the case.
It's a good thing
right.
It's a good thing to accept about yourself. Yeah,
exactly. So then it was a surprise. Like, it was never supposed to be a living. It was just this thing I felt compelled to do. And it was a surprise that it kind of struck a chord, so to speak, and and took off. And it was an especially wonderful surprise because it meant that the music that I loved and seemed on the verge of vanishing was getting a new life. And it was like, wow, I did something. I helped make something happen in the world. Like, that's gratifying.
For sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, you grew up going to the worker circle shul,
mm-hmm.
and was there? I mean, because I know sort of one of the funny results of the klezmer revival, so whatever you call it, that people don't always realize is the actual joining of the Yiddish worlds and the klezmer music worlds, which beforehand were not connected. So the klezmer world was these kind of, pro musicians. Maybe they were, or high-level amateurs, whether they actually did music full-time or they just played on the weekends. Like, I always remember hanging out with Hank Isnetsky's Uncle Marvin that he would bring to Klez Canada.
Wow.
And Marvin, I think, had a trade job, right? And then, but played Jewish music on the weekends, and he played trumpet. And one of his things was that he couldn't lead a tune because he was the second trumpet player in the band. So he couldn't remember anything to start. So you just had to start playing, and then he'd start playing along.
Yeah.
And everything was in his fingers, and almost nothing was in his brain. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And like, that's totally reasonable, right? But he played this beautiful klezmer, and it's like, but that wasn't, you wouldn't hear that, at a literary salon with some Yiddish songs or something like that. Like, that's one of the things that came to, I mean, was that true for you too? Like, klezmer music, the instrumental stuff was that part of your like early exposure to Yiddish music, or was it separate?
Well, when I was a kid and I was going to the workers, we called it workmen's circle then, now it's the workers' circle.
Yeah.
School, they taught us Yiddish folk songs, and not just folk, obviously theater songs, Wife and Pripachik, the Chestnuts. They taught us the Chestnuts.
Yeah.
And my parents listened to WEVD, the station that speaks your language. And I would hear cantorial music and, the Barry Sisters. And probably in the Barry Sisters recordings were Dave Taras.
Because Taras is on a lot of them.
Right. But you wouldn't hear straight up klezmer. Like, that was really the nadir of klezmer in that era, the 60s and early 70s. So I was getting a Yiddishist education, and I was a little bit in that world, but klezmer was actually absent from it. And then when I started getting into klezmer, it was the beginning of Kles Camp. The first year I went was the second year of Kles Camp. And Kles Camp really brought together those worlds, I think. I mean, certainly, there were Yiddish songs on the very first Klezmer Revival albums by Capellia and, vocals. Josh Waletsky and Michael Alpert sang stuff on those. That they were part of the recorded output of the revival from the beginning. But the worlds, like the Yiddishist world of YIVO and of the Worker Circle, and the musician world met and fell in love at Kles Camp, which was a YIVO project, actually, the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research.
And this is what we're talking about when we talk about reinvention, not like just reinvention. People think, well, you brought this stuff back to the present the way it always was. And it's like, no, like really so many things that just never had happened before, including, you like playing with these, like, both on the level of an individual person's musical style, like bringing a Greek sound or a Turkish sound into a klezmer gig and onto a Bulgar or something like that, and bringing these giant worlds together on a community level, or even on a musical business level, being involved in these like festivals in Germany. I mean, great example. There was no klezmer music in Germany. There never was until the 80s.
Right.
People always think, well, this brings me back to nothing. It's a dream.
Yeah.
But the thing is, dreams and myths are important, especially when reality sucks.
Yes.
And so I was just wondering if there are any specific, like, real, like, how the hell did I get here moments from those days when, the train had left the station and you were just hanging on and you're like, I'm just hanging on for dear life.
How did I get here? There were a lot of thrills on that roller coaster ride, like a lot of brushes with celebrity and, getting to work with people. Like, there was one festival where we collaborated with Allen Ginsberg and Jerome Rothenberg. Jerome Rothenberg just passed away. He was a beat poet.
Passed away, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that was not ever on my radar. And it was incredible. We played music for them to read their beat poetry too. And, there were a lot of moments that, were really like knocked my socks off. But through it all, I also kept thinking, well, I'm doing this now, but eventually I'm going to graduate school and I'm going to get a PhD. And, there were several ideas and, I'm just doing this for now. This is fun. And I never actually made a decision to be a musician. It snowballed in a nice way. The plan had been to be a neuroscientist. And, I still hold out some hope that, one day I'll be a neuroscientist. But
yeah, I mean, there's always more time, thinking about that time also just like maybe, and then we could sort of leave it behind and get back to now. But Bela and I were thinking about the piece that you got in Hey Alma, and I'm so glad you're getting press for this record because it's really, really important that klezmer music gets good press and or any press, because I think people have sort of flipped all the way to the other side of the coin where they're like, well, everybody knows what klezmer music is. And anybody I talk to who's like under 25 goes, well, I grew up with klezmer music. And I'm like,
hilarious.
You don't understand how weird that sounds
right.
to me, But, we were talking about like the way you were all centering your queerness in your work in a very like immediate and timely way. And it sounds to me like it was just like, this is who we are. We're just being ourselves. What are you going to do other than be yourself? Kind of like how you said you came to your violin sound. You brought everything with you and you're like, well, I'm not going to leave some of this behind just because it's, for whatever reason. I'm just going to bring it all with me. But at the same time, you also were really explicit about it.
Yeah. It was exciting to do that, to decide to do it. And it was scary. And it's hard to explain, to people younger than me that was a really, really different time. Like, you were taking big social risks by coming out. It wasn't like now in any way, shape, or form. So my feeling was that there were people in the audience, especially young people, who would really benefit from and would feel really great hearing somebody on stage say, I'm a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
It's shocking to some people and, perhaps life-saving to others. It felt like another thing that was in my power to do. And so Lauren, the singer in the Klezmatics, and I, we did, and we changed lyrics of songs to sometimes have, same-sex love lyrics happening in the songs. And we would just say things to signal to people out there that we were there, and they could come talk to us after the show. And it was something I always wished I had growing up. And it was a point in time where it was very, very new and unusual to do that. So in terms of like just being us, just being me and how that fit in. So I got into therapy at the time, and I loved the concept of authenticity, that I was introduced to in the context of, traditional talk psychotherapy, that like you find out what you really think, what you really feel, and not just what you're performing and pretending to yourself, authenticity, like what is your true self? And I thought about the use of the word authenticity in terms of folk music, because I was the first undergraduate ethnomusicology student at Brown in the new department that was established when I was in college. So after I was majoring in neuroscience, then I dropped out and I hitchhiked around Europe. And then I went back, I changed my major to ethnomusicology, and I was the only one. And the kind of folklore studies and ethnomusicology at that time was just starting to emerge from the idea, which is really like a German Romanticism idea of like folk music grows from the soil of the people, and it just like in a ghostly way, it just descends in this collective unconscious to, like that people were first starting in academia to pay attention to what was called syncretic, fusion works, and to question the idea of authenticity. So somehow those two uses of the term authenticity kind of came together in my head when I was first starting out in the Klezmatics. And it was like, well, what's playing authentic Jewish music in more like the psychotherapy use of the word? It's being true to yourself. It's playing it authentically, which to me was like not to kind of cosplay. We didn't have that word back then.
No, but it's something those of us who played in Europe at certain times, you've seen it.
Yeah.
Jewish cosplay.
Fisherman caps, the vests, right. Right. Not to reproduce the past note for note, not to do a theater of the past, but what I'm Jewish, if I play Jewish music, then it's Jewish, then it's authentic. So that became sort of my philosophy, and it came out of like, these weren't such obvious things to do. Like it was a bit of a challenge. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had to be thought through. It was going against the grain, like being an out gay person, wasn't like falling off a log in our world. And
yeah, that's true.
First of all, playing traditional Jewish music. Second of all, doing weird things to it wasn't either. Not everybody liked that or agreed with it. So
right.
it always helped to just be authentic. And I still try to do that. I mean, everybody can get distracted by parnassa, by business and by trends and by trying to get a gig. But, the satisfaction and happiness and ultimately the value to other people, because, ultimately this should be a generous profession where you're giving art to people, to the world. It shouldn't be about you and your ego and your insecurities and this and that, all the things that can be distractions and the devil's on the musician's shoulder. It should be outward facing. So it always helps, to remember to be authentic and not get distracted.
No, that really does help, Alicia. And I actually really appreciate that at this moment. I just had a conversation with another musician where I think I clearly saw some business stuff that made me sad and feel, I guess, jealous, but also just jealous of people having some kind of seemingly financial stability with their work. Whereas right now I feel like that's a little more tenuous than I'd like. And this musician just said, I think you're 100% correct, but I don't think it's helpful. And I'm like, yeah, that sucks, because it's nice to be right, but it also is better to be helpful,
Yes.
And I think what you said says it also in a really, really eloquent way. It's like we have to keep our eyes on the big goals, like the human goals, right? And I love what you said about authenticity in both senses of like, you can think about like, how do I play this Jewish music authentically to itself and authentically to myself? And it's funny because you were talking about doing something that went against the grain, but we even started the conversation with you talking about making this very string-heavy, old-world sound record Fiedel as also being against the grain. And for those of us who are experiencing the klezmer world in 2024, which is awesome, and it's global, and it's so varied, and there's people who have taken all these different like points of musical origin so far, I always think it's really wonderful if you can kind of just try to rewind your mind to the idea when all of this stuff was like shockingly new.
Yeah.
Like you said, whether it's playing like a 19th century repertoire fiddle song with this cymbalum and some other stuff, whether it's being an out gay person on stage, like all this stuff, both of those things I think would seem not such a hard lift today, but at some point it was shockingly new. I think the goal isn't to find what's shockingly new now. That's not the goal. The goal is authenticity, like you said. Like that's a really great thing.
Yeah, and sometimes to do it, you really have to shut off the proverbial noise, and just, remember who you are, what you love, and how it makes you feel. And yeah, that's the trick.
Yeah, totally. Well, I appreciate it because right now with being a new parent and having these new kind of financial responsibilities and just responsibility, it helps me. I mean, most of my days, thankfully, are spent with a very small human being who only does that, who doesn't know how to do anything else other than be authentic and true to themselves.
Right.
And but I get confused when I have to like sit at home and try to like answer emails and stuff.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
So, fast forward, I guess, a lot of time, and I was thinking about for you the balance of traditional music and original music and how that's been part of, kind of big swings in that has been part of your work. But thinking about original music versus traditional music, and I would say on Fiddle of Fire and Fiedel, I think there's a couple more original tunes on Fiddle of Fire than there were on Fiddle, but there's a couple. You've always thrown in a couple of your tunes, even in these traditional records, and they're great, and you're great at writing the traditional tunes. I don't know if you remember, I asked for the chart for Healthy Baby Girl Hora, and I play it all the time.
Oh, wow.
It's such a great tune.
Thank
I love
you.
playing that tune.
Oh, I'm so happy.
But yeah, I was wondering if you, first of all, like thinking about, especially on these two records which are linked, the balance of traditional tunes versus original tunes and how that like fits in your work. And then I want to hear a little bit about the specific original tunes on Fiddle of Fire. And then after that, I think I want to talk about like a film score work where you've done much like where the balance of original music is much higher.
Yeah.
Is my guess, right? But yeah, so like tell me about like making a klezmer record and including original tunes on there, and then also about these specific. We have questions about Mein Mama Very, but specifically. But no, go for it.
Yeah. So to me, it's all of a piece. Like we were saying before about there's no such thing as the magical folk consciousness with, unknown authors. Like every tune was written by somebody. So the traditional tunes were written by somebody, and the new traditional tunes I'm writing were written by somebody. And it's all, it's all one thing. So that's why I put them on Fiedel too, because I felt they were traditional tunes. Yeah. And I've had years of pent up material. I'm going to make more albums quickly in succession now. I hope. Because
I've also said that about myself.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's both do it.
Let's do it. Let's make a vow right now in front of a podcast audience.
you made an album slowly, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now we can make some albums quickly.
Boom. And I have a lot of saved up material that I haven't recorded, including a lot of original tunes. And I like to write an earworm. I like to write stuff that's really melodic. I like melodic music. I'm kind of a person of the 19th century that way. I mean, I love Brahms and Dvorak, and I love poignant melodies, and I guess I'm kind of sentimental. So I like to write klezmer tunes also that have, emotional kind of twinges in them and memorable melodies. And I have them running through my head all the time. So it's a matter of kind of catching them on the fly, doing the voice memo on the phone, or, whatever, singing into, I used to call home and sing into the answering machine.
That's awesome.
So now I think I take a video is what I do. And
nice.
So the original stuff on the album, I start out with an improvisation called Fiddle a Fire Fantasy, which is kind of cantorial. A lot of what I do actually on the fiddle is chazonish. It's cantorial, and I'm kind of emulating the sound of a cantor. And then there's actually a tune on the album which I didn't write, but it's the kind of thing I would have loved to have written, and I don't think anybody else has ever recorded it before. It's a tune which on the album is called the Levet Bulgar because...
Yep, that's what I guessed. It like fits in because it's like I was thinking about your Pochton. It fits right in there. Yeah. It's a cool shredder.
It's a shredder, exactly.
Yeah.
And Marty Levitt recorded it, I think, on his album The King of the Klezmers, which is sort of a tongue-in-cheek title, I think, because his friends used to call him that.
Like there were a lot of klezmer kings back in the day, apparently.
Well, I think the idea was that like that and $5 will get you a cappuccino, King of the Klezmers, yeah. Good luck with that. What a thing to be king of. Right. So he recorded it, and his son, Dave Levitt, a trombonist, said that he always had it on his music stand. He would use it to practice, and it was the last thing on his stand when he passed away. So he gave me the manuscript some years ago, and I've been playing it ever since, and I recorded it on the album. So it's somebody's original. I don't know who. Right.
I think he may. Talking about it with Wintergrad, I feel like the conversation was that Marty wrote it.
Well,
I think.
I always thought and assumed Marty wrote it, and Dave said no.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So
but this is the folk process.
Exactly.
So don't assume you know anything about klezmer tunes, and don't tell me what the names are because I don't know which tune you're talking about from the name either.
Forget about it.
I know, but yeah, there's some really good ones, and there's the McDowell Freilachs, and the Pochtons is another shredder, kind of in the same style as the Levitt tune, almost like in terms of just like ripping.
Right. I like to write fiddle tunes that have a lot of notes. Maybe as I get older, I will mature and start cutting out notes till it's a Schenkerian analysis of a klezmer tune. People can Google that.
Don't worry about it.
It's worth it, but musician to musician. So yeah, you
got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So, but for now, I still like a lot of notes. So the Pochtons, I stuck there. There's a traditional Pochtons melody that's in the middle, and the rest is new Pochtons stuff around it. And
nice.
The Dybbuk Honga, this is an example. I wrote this in the 1990s for the Dybbuk, and it was an outtake. And finally, I get to record it. And then the McDowell Freilachs that I wrote like in 2014 when I was at the McDowell Artist Colony. And so that one's very traditional sounding, I think. I mean, I hope I'm going to fake some people out with that one.
Right. No, the title won't, but but the sound can, I was sort of like, which ones? Oh, yeah, but okay. And then you wrote a vocal song, which Vera Lazinski sings wonderfully.
Yeah, Vera. What happened was I got into the session and I couldn't do it. I was like, I need a real singer, and I called Vera, and she was fantastic.
That's awesome. But this one sounds like it comes from the heart a little bit.
Yes, this one is quasi autobiographical. So I wrote a whole song cycle of Yiddish poetry, actually also some English and Hebrew poetry about mothers and motherhood that I set to music. So none of the lyrics are original. They're all poems.
Oh, I see.
20th
Okay,
century
great.
poems. When I saw this one, I was like, yeah, it's a poem about getting older and starting to look like your own mother. And
Uh-huh.
so at the time I was middle-aged, and it talks about, your hair starting to get gray, wrinkles starting to appear, looking in the mirror and going, Mom, and then realizing, nope, that's me.
That's
So
you.
I love the
Wow.
song, and I set it to a very, like a dance tune, because I think getting older is great, better than the alternative. So it's a happy tune.
Honestly, it's pretty cool. Like I'm enjoying many aspects of it. You know, one of the things, this is like a total, take over the conversation, but one of the things that's been wild to me is getting to work with people who are not just like 3, 5 years younger than me, but 10, 15, almost 20
Yeah,
years younger than me, who are like, who are of the age now, because I'm 40, who are of the age now who are like hungry trying to make it happen,
right.
and then you can be like, and what's really great is both being able to go, yeah, I know something about what you're trying to do. Let me try to, if you're willing and the situation is like consensual, let me tell you what I know. And then at the same time being like, oh yeah, I don't know what the hell, I don't know. I'm still working on this and let's try to figure it out together, or I don't know anything about that and like, can you tell me about it?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's cool. It's really great. I think one of the things that's great about our klezmer scene is that I think we've doing an okay job of like making that happen. I mean, I remember you were at Klez. I wasn't able to make it because of a very young baby, but you were at Klez Canada last year, and all these people from West Philly came back and were like, I need to be doing this, that, and the other. One of them just started playing violin again after a long
Oh,
time.
that's great.
You lit that fire.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
So I actually want to talk to you. Last couple times I've seen you perform was I think in Philadelphia with doing your silent film scores,
Ah,
and
yes.
that's stuff where you've, I mean, I think you've focused a lot of your performing work on that in the last, like, say 5, 10 years, maybe a little longer. And I was going to ask, how did that start? And then also, what's the process for you, like when you're not just writing a tune or a melody, but like when you have to create like a whole atmosphere?
Yeah, it's so fun. It's a completely different thing. Again, talking about like facing outward and fighting against, the inward stuff. When you're writing a score for a film, you are writing and playing music in service of the film. It's not about you. It's not about, standing on stage with a spotlight and doing a stage rap and being a personality with an audience. You are doing something in the service of art. And, you have to disappear and your music into the film so that it feels to the audience like one. Sometimes audiences are like, oh, I forgot, the music was fit so well with the film that I practically forgot it was there. It was just part of the whole thing. And that's like, thank you, because if you're successful, that happens with film music. And if you're not, it kind of sticks out and distracts, right? So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I started this about 10 years ago. I got a commission to write a new score to the 1918 film The Yellow Ticket, which was about a Jewish young woman who wants to go to medical school and has to lead a double life in a brothel in order to make that happen. And I wrote it for me and Marilyn Lerner, a wonderful pianist in the klezmer scene, and also like a new music person, an improviser. And we toured that a lot. And then we did it at a silent film festival in Italy, where I met my current collaborator, who's Donald Sosin, who is a prolific, and he's possibly the greatest silent film pianist in the world. And he has recorded hundreds of scores that he wrote or improvised for Criterion and other outlets. And so we have written together now three scores for three Jewish themed silent films: The Ancient Law, City Without Jews, and Man Without a World, which is especially, I think, interesting for the klezmer world because it was made in the 1990s as like a fake silent film, a pastiche, and it's just full of Yiddish folklore, and it's just fabulous and clever.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
its filmmaker is Eleanor Anton, who was a pioneering feminist performance artist in the 60s and 70s. I recently we both, me and Donnie, got to meet her a couple of months ago. So we write these scores, which are kind of an amalgam of, I write new klezmer tunes, a lot of new klezmer material. And then he's a classical composer. He takes them and weaves the themes into, much more complex contrapuntal compositions and arrangements, all of which match kind of moment by moment to what's going on the screen. And that's also something that happens in the playing, that we'll write something together, and then playing it, you find yourself watching the screen and emphasizing certain motions, certain gestures differently every night. We've done this, like, I don't know, a couple hundred times all around the world. We have 2 more coming out soon. Well, one,
Oh, wow.
one very soon, and then one down the line.
Because it's funny. It's a lot of music to write.
Yes, it is. It's like 90 minutes or 2 hours worth of music. So it's like a symphony in a way, like a romantic symphony, that length.
Like a late 19th century symphony or something. Yeah, I saw you do City Without Jews in Philadelphia, and it was, I mean, first of all, that movie is a trip.
Isn't it?
I guess that's like, isn't it awesome to not just, you're not just doing some random movies, like you're doing some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's a wild movie.
It's wild. And they're newly restored too.
Oh, right. Well, I think that really helps. Yeah, no, it sounds like I remember talking to him, and he was like, oh, he's really involved in that whole film music world,
right,
which is cool because it's like, I had a teacher in college whose first gig as a teenager was accompanying silent films on the piano because he was really not young at that time. And
wow.
It's like, I always think it would be so cool. I would even be happy to just play some of the old scores with the movie. Like, because the thing is, it's like nowadays, if you're in a professional orchestra, they do a lot of these shows with modern movies, like a John Williams score. And
right.
I'm sure as a brass player, playing a John Williams score is as fun gets, right?
Totally.
But I think it's all in-ear click track with the conductor. And like you're saying, like with this other stuff, it's kind of like you have to breathe with the movie a little bit.
We do.
More. I mean, it's a choice, I guess, but
we also have thousands of cues that have to sync exactly with the movie. And we use a conducting program on the laptop to make that happen. So
that's cool.
It's kind of a workout for the brain as well.
But it's like you're using the equivalent of a click track where it's like the things that need to happen at exactly the right time have to happen. But because of the music you're making and the style you're making it in, it has to have some give because
a lot.
It wouldn't work stylistically for the kind of for klezmer you can't really.
Nope.
You can't play klezmer with perfect quantization. Doesn't sound so good.
And a lot of it's usually really rubato, and a lot of it is like kind of early 20th century or 19th century style, romantic or, with a lot of give. So we can't use a click track at all. So that's why
Right.
we
But
have
you
to.
found this other technological sort
Right.
of like way to split the difference. That's cool. I think we live in this tech world and we're not going back, but it's good to know that there's more options than just like
Yeah.
click, 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 click,
Oh my
and
gosh.
everything gets regimented
Ooh.
into. I mean, it would be hard for us. Some people really thrive in that world, and the right music. I guess it's really cool. It's useful, but yeah. All right. Well, I think we're kind of getting to a wrap up point. So I was thinking, Fetal of Fire is out. No,
On.
tell me, what do you got?
I
It's on.
It's on the Borscht Beat, on the Borscht Beat label. This
Yes.
is important because there is this new Jewish music label. It's the first Jewish music label since like the 1960s, Antiqua Records. Aaron Bentic is its mastermind. And
Yeah.
I'm really proud that, Fetal of Fire is on this label, which is going to carry Jewish music forward into the next century.
Yeah.
This
And
is the young generation you're talking about. Aaron is the future, and Borscht Beat is the future for Jewish music, as far as I'm concerned.
I've got my Borscht Beat sticker right
There you
here, which of
go.
course all the audience can see.
Delicious.
But and if people want to go back in the podcast feed, we've got a really nice interview with Aaron that we did, I think, released last year. And yeah, I mean, what can I say? He's a mensch, and he is putting his money where his mouth is, and he is following his own passion, and he is doing, as they say, the Lord's work in because running a record label in 2024 is maybe even more thankless than being a professional musician in some ways.
Yep.
I really want us to build. Obviously he's doing great with the release schedule and having people like you involved. And it really helps, drive some of the press towards it. And I think it's like, one of the things in the klezmer world that I was actually going to ask about, hopes and dreams, basically, like what's next, but also, what would you want to be next? And I think for me, one of the things that I want to see from a business perspective is trying to recap. We can't go back to when getting big klezmer gigs in a country, say in Central Europe, was like a piece of cake, I think, relatively to what it is now. And we also can't go back to the prices but like I would love to see this generation, like the current people, the multi-generational klezmer world as it currently exists, really get a chance through press and through releases to define itself in the world a little more strongly and to leave some of the illusions of the past, some of which were like beautiful because that's the best we could do at the time with the information we had, and some of which are a little weird in terms of like people, let's say, conflating Balkan music and klezmer music together because they kind of don't understand that two different styles of music can both have a flat second. It's like I want to see a robust presence online and in the world that people can sink their teeth into, and where you can kind of come join us and you don't only have to do it through a place like Klez Canada or, Yiddish New York, but you can just, like, we're really there. And it's happening. It's totally happening. But releases like this one are a really important piece of the puzzle. And so I'm really glad. And also Borscht Beat is too. So yeah, for you, what's coming up? What's exciting you? What's driving you? What are your hopes and dreams? What do you got?
Well, I do have another album in the can, but I'm kind of keeping it under wraps, except to say that it's a really, really different approach than Fetal of Fire. It's a bit of a 180. So I'm going to wait to,
You contain multitudes and you get to do it, right?
That'll probably come out like February-ish or something.
Oh, good.
But meanwhile, I am going to keep recording because it's now or never, and
yes.
Or it's now or when I'm, 90 and I have arthritis or something. Like now's a good time, as opposed to
now's a good time.
So,
I mean, hopefully then will be a good time for something else, but now's a good time for this.
and what I want to do now that I've had so much fun with the musicians were so great. I had two bands, a New York band and a Boston band, like the best of the best. And
Totally.
we had an album release show in New York at New Blue, and then in Boston at the Burren, which was sold out. And so I'm going to set a date for a second show. And what I want to do is kind of go back to my roots in another way and do like a tour, like, Dora gigs every night for as many nights as we could string together. And, we're not going to quite sleep in the van, but like go back to that kind of thing and get the music out there live.
Yeah, I think that's also another piece of the puzzle, and you can really see the difference between the bands that are able to figure out how to do that and the bands that aren't. And if anybody says, well, I really haven't figured out how to do that, I say, that's fair. It's incredibly difficult.
It is, yeah.
And we need and we still need you. And it's important to not take that in a harmful way and to take it as oh, it's such a shame I can't fulfill my responsibilities. No, it's like, we want your gifts. We want your gifts, Alicia. Like, we want people all over to be able to hear you live playing this klezmer music in a way that maybe they haven't heard you in such a direct, rock and roll way in a while. Like, it's like seed the land, like drop some knowledge, drop some experiences. It's not for you to know what's going to happen from them, but if you don't get to do it, like, each of us, you and everybody else I'm proverbially talking to, have a lot to offer, and like, let's get it out there.
Let's get it out there. Totally. And thank you.
All right. Well, Alicia Svigals, what a treat to talk to you. And
likewise.
Thanks so much for being here. And Fetal of Fire, you can find it. Borscht Beat Bandcamp. I'm sure it's on all the streaming services, so go listen, and also go to the Bandcamp and buy it, because one CD is worth thousands of streams. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I think a CD now is worth like 40,000 streams. So,
and you can hold it in your hand.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
It's nice.
Awesome.
All right, thank you. It's been great talking to you. What fun.
Conversation with Alicia Svigals, violinist, composer, band leader, and a whole lot more. And just an awesome person to talk to and hang out with. As you might have heard, some of the stuff we got into got me a little fired up, And I think a lot of that is just how much I appreciate Alicia for who she is and how she's carried herself as an artist, as a musician throughout her career. And a lot of it's just the stuff that we got into and how much I really deeply care about and love this whole klezmer world. So, from my heart to you, I love you all, and I want to hear your music. And as much as I can, I want to share our stories through this podcast. And I'll say it again, patreon.com/radiantothers, and rate and subscribe, share it online, tell your friends, all that kind of good stuff. And we'll be back with another episode. We're running about once a month right now, and we are really, really glad to be doing so. So thanks to producer Bela Unger for all their hard work, and thanks to you all for listening. I hope you're all doing well, and have a good Shabbos.